සුපිරි අධිවේගයක් පරදා ඔබ මවිත කරවන වේගයක් විඳ ගන්න. පියවර 3කින් ශ්‍රී ලංකා ටෙලිකොම් ෆයිබර් ඔප්ටික් ජාලයට එක්වන්න. slp.lk වෙත පිවිසෙන්න.
Good evening. Tonight, Saving Nature. President Maithripala Sirisena addresses the 24th session of the Committee on Forestry in Rome and assures increasing the country's forest capacity up to 32%.
We have commenced project to plant 5 million trees by 2020.
A new path. Tamil National Alliance says will support the 20th Amendment while waiting for a new constitution.
Our position is that we will support the 20th Amendment.
Withdraw it now. Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna Chairman Professor G.L. Pires requests the British government to withdraw the resolution against Sri Lanka at the UN Human Rights Council.
It is manifestly unjust that this resolution should be allowed to stand.
Well, live across the nation, this is Sri Lanka's news channel, Other Derana 24/7. Hello everyone, I'm Mahesh Johnny and welcome to First at 9. Well, from Moscow, let's take you to Italy. President Maithripala Sirisena is in Rome at the moment, taking part in the 24th session of the Committee on Forestry and the 6th World Forest Week. Here, addressing the committee, the head of state said that Sri Lanka is committed to ensuring increasing the country's forest capacity up to 32% as per a requirement in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals.
The 24th session of Committee on Forestry and the 6th World Forest Week will explore the contributions that forests can make to achieve sustainable development goals. President Maithripala Sirisena delivered his special message during his address to the committee this morning.
Sri Lanka is now highly committed to conserve its existing forest cover and enhance to 32% by adopting better practices to improve land governance as a key measures to achieve the SDG target. Forests also provided many socio-economic benefits, including food, energy and shelter, which are basic human needs. To sustain the project and services that help to meet these and other needs, forests must be sustainably managed. Reforestation has been the responsibility of the Forest Department. With the coordination of many other government ministries, local government institutions and cooperative societies, we have commenced project to plant 5 million trees by 2020. We will persuade to plant trees that could bring some income to the children and household. This will encourage and make the children aware of their duty to preserve the nature.
Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe says that investigations into the alleged financial fraud where a large number of cheques have been encashed several days prior to the presidential election in 2015 continues. The Premier made this remark addressing the UNP Parliamentary Group meeting which was held this morning at Temple Trees. Prime Minister also added that 1,398 million rupees has been taken via 82 cheques during the period of December 1st in 2014 to January 8th in 2015 and distributed among officials attached to the Presidential Secretariat. He also adds that the Special Investigation Unit of Police has already forwarded the files to the Attorney General's Department and investigations are being conducted under the direct supervision of Deputy Solicitor General Yasantha Dagoda. The chairman of the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna, Professor G.L. Pires, says that steps will be taken by him to write to British Foreign Secretary Jeremy Hunt requesting him to support the withdrawal of the current standing UN Human Rights Council Resolution 30-1 as it has been implemented based on false data. The professor made this statement during a media briefing in Colombo today.
On the 1st of October 2015, the UN Human Rights Council passed a resolution 30/1 against Sri Lanka, which was brought in by the United States and co-sponsored by the government of Sri Lanka. The United Kingdom also played a major role in this resolution by canvassing support to pass the said resolution in the Council. Addressing a media briefing in Colombo today, the chairman of the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna, Professor G.L.P. says that in the light of comments made by Lord Naseby of the House of Lords, the erroneous facts of the resolution does not withstand and hence needs to be removed from the Human Rights Council. Lord Naseby spoke exclusively to First at 9's Indivari Amawatte in London during a recent airing of her programme at Hyde Park, where he confirmed these details.
That there never was a policy to kill Tamil civilians, and secondly, the numbers killed certainly were not 40,000, which is what the UN suggested was a probable number. Maybe some people in the UN said as many as 100,000, but the figures there were 5,000 to 6,000. Now, I have asked the ICRC quietly and privately, 3 different senior people at different times on 3 different visits, have you seen any evidence, and they're everywhere in Sri Lanka, as you know as well as I do, of genuine torture as defined by the Geneva Convention? The answer I've had each time has been no. We have seen some heavy handling, and that's to be deplored.
In today's media briefing, Professor G.L.P. reiterated the facts that it's time for the resolution to be abolished at the Human Rights Council.
During the last 2 years, Lord Naseby has been addressing a series of communications to the British Foreign Office, and some material has been elicited in consequence of that correspondence. But even the unredacted portions are very useful as evidence of what really occurred at that time. The responses by the British Foreign Office and the unredacted material makes it very clear that the numbers which were mentioned at that time, for instance, 40,000 people missing and responsibility for that being attributed to the armed forces, that all this is without any factual foundation whatsoever. In the light of all this evidence, it is manifestly unjust that this resolution should be allowed to stand. This is particularly so in light of the statement by the then United Nations Human Rights Commissioner, Prince Zaid Al Hussein, who candidly admitted at a press conference in Geneva that the course of action taken by the Human Rights Council in respect of Sri Lanka was unprecedented. It was a unique course of action. That is not surprising because no other country would have tolerated that degree of interference in its internal affairs. The content of the resolution relates to matters which pertain to domestic policy, matters which should be left to the elected representatives of the Sri Lankan people sitting in parliament to handle. These are not matters for any foreign agency or body. In these circumstances, we think that the Human Rights Council should withdraw this resolution. It is based on false premises, on assumptions which have been disproved by evidence which has come to light thereafter. And we think that the government of the United Kingdom has a significant role to play in this regard.
In other local stories we have for you tonight, the delegation of the European Union, the missions of the EU member states in Sri Lanka, as well as the diplomatic missions of the governments of Canada and Norway in Sri Lanka have written to the President of Sri Lanka, President Maithripala Sirisena, to verify the information in the public domain about the intentions of the Sri Lankan government to resume the implementation of the death penalty after a moratorium of over 40 years. Issuing a media communique, the group of diplomatic missions who signed the letter said they strongly and undeniably oppose capital punishment in all circumstances and in all cases.
The communique says that they have pointed out to the President that the death penalty is incompatible with human dignity, does not have any proven deterrent effect, and it allows judicial errors to become fatal and irreversible. Henceforth, the EU delegation requests the President to continue the moratorium on the implementation of the death penalty and to uphold Sri Lanka's tradition of opposition to capital punishment. Meanwhile, names of 18 inmates who are on death row have been sent to the Ministry of Justice by prison officials. They are expected to present them to the commission appointed by the President to look into the means of implementing the death penalty. Prison Commissioner HMSC Dhanasinghe says that they are currently purchasing the required equipment to carry out the capital punishment. Steps have also been taken to call in applications to fill the position of executioner. Our reporter managed to speak to a 71-year-old woman in Arachikattu area who wished to fulfill this position.
I'm 71 years old. Not only should they execute drug traffickers, but also rapists. I like to take up this position. I can't stand people who rape little children. It makes my heart ache. Today this is not a land of the Buddha, but it has turned out to be a land of murderers and drug traffickers.
Meanwhile, politicals were forthcoming with views on the capital punishment.
When I take a look at the list, it's sad to say the first person is a woman. It's women who are leading the drug business. Sri Lanka is a hub for drugs. There are many people who are responsible for this. There are prison officials who are responsible and several others in government. We will not safeguard them.
How much of drugs should a person have in order to be sentenced to death in Sri Lanka? If someone has more than 2 grams of drugs, then they can be executed. So how much do they have when they get caught these days? Over 250 grams of drugs. So how many times should they be executed in order to spend this sentence? So can you solve this problem by implementing the death penalty? They export drugs in containers now, and many high-level politicians are involved in this. So does it make sense to kill a person who have just 2 grams in their hand and not do anything for the others? I don't think this will take place. How many times did they say they will do this and that, like banning polythene and asbestos? Until I see this from my very own eyes, I will not believe it. If they want to implement this, then they should do it for the persons who does this within or outside of a cell. International organizations, non-governmental organizations and all their representatives here in the country have begun to make statements saying that this is a violation of human rights. Who are they standing up for? They are standing up for the people who have smuggled a huge amount of drugs to this country. We do not have to listen to them.
Meanwhile, speaking to First at 9, attorney at law Krishma Varnasurya says that perhaps Sri Lanka should look into an alternative method of arriving at the decision of capital punishment.
The international human rights considerations, life, the right to life, is considered a paramount, is considered a fundamental right of every human being. And it is only under the strict sanction of the law that that life that have been assured as a fundamental right or a human right can be taken away from. So even the court system gives a lot of prominence and seriousness to the imposition of the death sentence. Now, when we speak of the death sentence, it is important to also note that this can only be and must only be given within the sanction of the 4 corners of the law. Now, a couple of years back, when we had discussions on this particular matter with those of the American Bar Association in New York, the Bar Association there have gone into a research on the death sentence and some instances on where the death sentence has visited people who ought not to have been executed. Now, that's a danger. So, we have to be careful that all such, even the slightest chance of that happening, of a man whose life ought to have been protected, have been taken away by the death sentence. That should never ever happen. Now, they have, in their research, they have come out with certain systems. Now, the jury system, for example, is a good system where, now as you know, most of our criminal trials are done before a high court judge, except in special circumstances or where a jury is requested. A jury is not the norm in our trials. Perhaps we must think of a jury system again.
TNA parliamentarian M.A. Sumanthiran reiterates that the task of making a new constitution should be prioritised. Participating in an event held in Moratuwa today, he said that till then they will support the passing of the 20th Amendment, which includes the abolishment of the executive presidency.
Our position is that we will support the 20th Amendment. That has been our stance right throughout, that the executive presidency must be abolished. Nevertheless, now there is a new constitution project and we believe that we can proceed with that. Whatever is contained in the 20th Amendment is also proposed in the new constitution according to the interim report. Therefore, we think priority must be given to creating a new constitution at this opportune moment. But for whatever reason, if that is not possible, we will still support the 20th Amendment.
Minister of Finance and Mass Media, Mangala Samaraveera, says that the government hopes to allocate 6% of the country's GDP towards education. The ministry is of the view that by doing so, the country would be able to design the required workforce addressing the country's economical needs. Minister Samaraveera made these observations at the Early Childhood Development Programme organised by UNICEF this morning.
Marking Policymakers' Day of National Early Childhood Care Week 2018, titled Building Brains, Building Futures, the Sri Lanka Early Childhood Development High-Level Meeting presented early childhood-centric budget proposals to Finance Minister Mangala Samaraveera for his consideration in the 2019 national budget at an event held in Colombo today. Addressing the gathering, the minister said that steps will be taken to ensure that more allocation will be given to early childhood education.
We want to create an economy where citizens are able to take their economic destiny into their own hands without relying on the state from cradle to the grave on jobs and handouts, which has been the situation so far. This entails the development of entrepreneurship and small business, which is supported by our recently launched Enterprise Sri Lanka vision and its scheme. And as you are well aware, at the heart of empowerment, of course, is education. It is education at all levels that endows people with the necessary skills to actively participate in the economy and in the development of a country. I would like to reiterate this government's commitment to investment and in education with renewed focus on early childhood development. In fact, we have raised the money invested in education from 1.46 in 2015 to nearly 3.5% last year, and our objective is to raise the money invested in education to 6% by the year 2025. So finally, again, let me thank you for giving me this opportunity to say a few words to you. And again, I will give you my assurance that many of the excellent proposals you have submitted this morning will be considered carefully and included in this year's budget. And we will also commit the necessary resources to support such programs.
Parliamentarians from the joint opposition engaged in an inspection tour of the Mattala Rajapaksa International Airport today to inquire into the current status of the facility. The visit comes following the government's decision to lease the international airport to an Indian company. The group of parliamentarians led by Parliamentarian Chamal Rajapaksa held discussions with airport officials. They also inspected the storage facility which is being used to store paddy, the fire emergency unit and the fuel station of the airport. Speaking to media, the parliamentarians warned that should the government lease out the Mattala Rajapaksa International Airport to India, it will lead to a power struggle between world superpowers in which Sri Lanka will be inevitably dragged into. The Colombo High Court granted former Minister Basil Rajapaksa permission to travel abroad for medical treatment. The case filed against Rajapaksa for allegedly misappropriating 36.5 million rupees of funds belonging to the Divinaguma Development Department to purchase and distribute GI pipes during the last presidential election was taken up today before High Court Judge AAR Heyanthudua. Attorneys appearing on behalf of the former minister informed the court that their client requires to travel to the United States from August 10th to November 10th as he is in need of medical treatment. The State Council informed the court that they had no objections to the request, however asked that permission to be granted in a manner that would not hinder hearing of the case. Accordingly, the High Court granted permission for Basil Rajapaksa to travel abroad during the said time period and also ordered to release his passport on a personal bond of 200,000 rupees. The judge also stated that further hearings of the case would have to be shifted to the Home Agama High Court as the incident comes under the jurisdiction of the Kaduwala Magistrates Court. With that, let's take a look at some other local stories from across Sri Lanka making the news tonight.
The fourth procession of the annual Asala festival of the historic Ruhunu Mahakataragama Devalaya commenced this evening. The Asala festival commenced last Friday and so far 3 traditional processions were conducted. FM Derana and TV Derana are the media sponsors for this event. The final touches to the officers of the Special High Court, which was established to expedite high-profile financial fraud and corruption cases, are being continuous, and its proceedings are due to commence next this week. As passed in Parliament last May, 3 such Special High Courts will be set up. Former senior DIG Prasanna Nanayakara and former Sub-Inspector Tissa Sugathapala, who were arrested and remanded over the murder of Lasantha Wickramatunge, have been granted bail by the Mount Lavinia Magistrates Court. Nanayakara was arrested by CID on February 14th this year for allegedly concealing evidence on the murder of the journalist, and SI Tissa Sugathapala, the former crimes OIC of the Mount Lavinia Police, was taken into custody on February 2nd.
You are watching Sri Lanka's award-winning news channel, Derana 24/7.
Let's take you to the stock market now. The all-share price index edged lower today from their highest close in 2 weeks in lighter than usual trading as foreign investors sold stocks. The Colombo stock index ended 0.12% weaker at 6,130.62. Turnover stood at 304.1 million rupees. Now here is Imeshu Fernando from the Colombo Stock Exchange with a detailed report.
The market capitalization at the end of the day was 2,864.48 billion rupees. Today's foreign purchases were 38.93 million rupees and foreign sales were 216.58 million rupees. There were 4 crossings today and the crossing turnover was 137.21 million rupees.
International news now. US President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin blew past the 90 minutes they were scheduled to spend with only interpreters at their side today, just hours after the US President blamed US policy for the dismal state of relations between the two countries. The two leaders kicked off their first official summit this afternoon at the Finnish Presidential Palace, a historic venue where previous US presidents have also gathered with their Russian and Soviet counterparts to tackle the complex bilateral relationship. Trump made clear at the outset that he hopes the meeting can help transform the relationship into an extraordinary one.
Security was ramped up in Helsinki on Monday morning ahead of the first ever summit between US President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin. Police cordoned off streets in the capital port area around Finland's presidential palace, the venue for the meeting. Hours before US President Donald Trump was due to sit down for his first ever summit with Vladimir Putin, Trump blamed US foolishness for bad relations between Washington and Moscow, while the Kremlin said it expected tough meetings. But the highly anticipated meetings that had been minutely planned began with a sluggish start after the Russian president arrived late, setting the summit about 45 minutes back. Relations were severely strained by Moscow's annexation of Crimea in 2014 and by claims that Russia helped Trump win the 2016 elections. Some US politicians even called for the summit to be cancelled after 12 Russian military intelligence agents were charged on Friday with hacking the presidential campaign of Democratic candidate Hillary Clinton. Speaking to media regarding the ongoing talks, US President Donald Trump said that he expects an extraordinary relationship between the two countries.
У нас продолжаются постоянные контакты. Предыдущие месяцы мы по телефону говорили, встречались несколько раз на площадках различных международных мероприятий. Ну, конечно, настало время поговорить обстоятельно о наших двухсторонних отношениях и по различным болевым точкам в мире, и достаточно много для того, чтобы мы обратили на это внимание.
I think we have great opportunities together as two countries that frankly we have not been getting along very well for the last number of years. I've been here not too long, but it's getting close to 2 years, but I think we will end up having an extraordinary relationship, I hope so. I've been saying, and I'm sure you've heard over the years, and as I campaigned, that getting along with Russia is a good thing, not a bad thing.
are watching Sri Lanka's premier news channel, Other Derana 24/7.
Sports now. The Independent Judicial Commissioner, Queen's Counsel Michael Beloff today handed Sri Lankan captain Dinesh Chandimal, coach Chantika Hathurusinga and manager Asanka Gurusinga 8 suspension points. Accordingly, the trio is suspended for the first 4 one-day internationals along with both the test against South Africa. The 3 were charged by the ICC Chief Executive David Richardson on 19th June and had pleaded guilty to breaching Level 3, which relates to court conduct that is contrary to the spirit of the game during last month's St. Lucia test against the West Indies.
You are watching Sri Lanka's #1 news channel, Other Derana 24/7.
Katharina Chang is at the Weather Centre with your forecast first.
A very good evening to you and welcome to Forecast First. Now, temperatures will range between 26 and 34 degrees Celsius with the highest temperature forecast for the eastern region of the island. Now, if you take a look at the map, you can see that there will be some high precipitation zones expected in the central as well as towards the western region of the island over the next 24 hours. Now, this means we can expect some sunny weather for most of the northern region of the island, some favourable weather conditions for Jaffna as well as Trincomalee towards the eastern side. Moving downwards, however, some wet weather is forecast for most of the main cities, particularly in the cities of Colombo, Galle and Kandy. That is it from your weather centre tonight. Up next is your city by city forecast.
And that is a part of your world tonight right here on Other Derana 24/7, Sri Lanka's news channel. I'm Mahesh Johnny. First at 9, we'll return tomorrow at the same time. Be sure to join us there.